morning and welcome to chapel. The Lord be with you. This is our last chapel during the season of Lent, and we're journeying through Holy Week this week. And so in addition to this chapel, this coming Thursday, we will have an optional worship time in the garage as well. We'd have it on Friday for Good Friday, but as we all know, that lunch is quite short on Friday. So we're going to have that on Thursday, time of worship and reflection on the suffering and the death of Jesus Christ. You're welcome to get your lunch and then make your way into the garage for that time. We'll start around 12:35, and we'll try to keep it within the lunchtime. We might go over a few minutes into office hours, but if you need to go, you can leave at that point as well. So you're all welcome to join us for that. A special welcome to the group of Japanese students who are with us today and this week. As you see them in the hallways, as you see them in your classes, I encourage you to give them a warm welcome. Find out their name, find out something about their culture, and welcome them to this place. May this place be a place that gives them a warm, gracious greeting.
At lunch. What we thought we would do is bring together World Language Week, Holy Week, and what we've been discussing and thinking about regarding AJS. Kim from Association for a More Just Society challenged us with the verse that I'm about to read. I will read it in English, and then someone will read the same verse in Spanish, Latin, German, French, Mandarin, a South African language, and Greek. Yeah. I will pray. Sorry about that. I will pray at the end, and then we will sing a hymn to sort of tie this all together. As you listen to the beauty of these diverse languages, please reflect on how amazing it is that we can all come together to worship our God in many voices. 1 John 3:16. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters.
Primero Juan, capítulo 3, 16. En esto conocemos lo que es el amor, en que Jesucristo entregó su vida por nosotros, así también nosotros debemos entregar la vida por nuestros hermanos.
Primos Johannes 3:10. In hoc novimus caritatem quoniam ille pro nobis animam, suam prosuit et nos debemus pro fratribus animam ponere. Johannes 3, Vers 16. Christus opferte sein Leben für uns. Daran haben wir erkannt, was Liebe ist. Wir müssen deshalb auch bereit sein, unser Leben für unsere Brüder und Schwestern zu opfern.
1 Jean 3,16. Voici comment nous savons que c'est l'amour. C'est que Jésus-Christ a donné sa vie pour nous. Donc, nous aussi, nous devons donner notre vie pour nos frères.
主为我们舍命，这样我们就知道什么是爱，我们也应当为弟兄舍命。
The South African language I'm reading in is called isiXhosa. Ngalento silwazile uthando kuba wasincamela ubomi bakhe, nathi ke sifanele ukubancamela abazalwane bethu ubomi bethu. Thank you.
Epistole Ioannu Alpha. En tutoi egnoskomen ten agapen, hoti ekenos huper hemon ten psuke.
Hemes o Philomen, Huper ton adelphon tas psukas thenai.
Mr. Borst came to me and told me that he had a chapel idea. I immediately was excited that L&M was getting together to spit some rhyme, but he informed me that his songwriting had been delayed again. He would instead like me to speak on forgiveness. There are 4 stages of forgiveness: hurt, hate, healing, and coming together. He wanted me to talk primarily on the first 2, hurt and hate. Does he always think of me when he thinks of hurt and hate? Why would he ask me to talk about these 2? Was it because I once punched him when he tried to hug me? Was it because I threatened to take my baseball bat to his mechanical bird? I'm not sure. I tell a lot of stories in my classes, but I've never told the one I'm going to tell you today, and I really don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if this is what Borst had in mind, but it's a story of these first 2 stages of forgiveness: hurt and hate. I do know that these are the types of stories some people don't like to hear because it didn't happen in some faraway place. It happened here, but it's reality, and the reality is that sometimes things don't turn out the way you'd like them to for a nice chapel talk. It was my first year as the varsity basketball coach here. It was about 15 years ago. We didn't have a very talented team on the basketball court, but there were some young men on the team that were awesome kids. And I'm lucky enough to call them friends today, as some of them are husbands and fathers. It was an unbelievably trying year for any coach, especially a first-year coach. Our best returning player was unable to play due to some trouble he had gotten in the summer. One of my friends, who was in charge of all the youth basketball in our program, and our point guard's father, died unexpectedly after the first 5 games. He was 41 years old. All the kids knew him. It was extremely traumatic for all of us, but through tears, hugs, late-night phone calls, we battled through it. We started the season 0-5. We won our first game the day after his funeral, after not having practiced for 6 days, and then went on to lose 5 more. It was a tough first half of the season for all of us, but we kept at it. The boys became very close. They loved to hang out together. It was therapy for them and for all of us. They'd come over on Sunday nights for movie night. They'd come over for spaghetti on Tuesdays. They were awesome. There was one young man on the team to whom basketball meant the world. I was worried about him. He lived in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, and we had many common acquaintances. I talked to him a lot about basketball and tried to talk to him about other things, to get him to branch out. His reality was closing in on him. He was a senior and his options were very limited, and none of those options included basketball. My family welcomed him into our home. Before the season even started, I went to his house and had a meeting with his parents. I explained to them how his expectations for the season and for his personal achievement were probably unrealistic. His parents and I prayed together for the upcoming season. His dad thanked me for being such a positive role model for his son, a mentor even. As the season progressed, we began to win some games, but this player played fewer and fewer game time minutes. I kept talking to him, trying to care for him as a person, kept having him over for dinner, for movies. A couple of phone calls from his father made me realize that his dad no longer looked at me as a role model for his son. Just because the coaching staff didn't think he was as good on the court as some of the others, and he didn't play in games as much, his dad became bitter, and eventually the son did too. After game 18, we were on a 5-game winning streak. We won a tough game against East Kentwood in the All-City Gym, and I walked into the locker room after the game to see the young man leaving in a rush. He was upset, and he told me he couldn't take it anymore. I told him we'd talk in the morning. After I addressed the team and was talking to his coaches, his dad came storming into the coaches' room. He yelled some unbelievable things at me, called me names, questioned my Christianity, said some terrible things about my family. He did all this while he was punching a locker with his fist traveling right next to my ear. He punched the locker multiple times and, in words I've never tried to forget, threatened to kill me. Now, in the flight or fight struggle, I am not a flight guy. As he was talking, I felt hatred building inside. I felt my right hand twitch every time he punched the locker. I wanted to drop him right there. Say no words, just drop him. My assistant coach at that time told me later that all he was doing was staring at my right hand to make sure I didn't. I would have lost my coaching job for sure, maybe more. It would have been in the newspaper. It would have been a terrible scene. After about 10 minutes of the tirade, he left when he was told that the police were on the way. The school informed the police of where I lived in case there was suspicious activity that night and extra patrols were in the neighborhood. I was told to lock my classroom door whenever possible until someone made contact with him to determine his state of mind. After these 10 minutes, with all this hatred and hurt inside, I realized that all of my players had heard the entire. They had showered and dressed, but none of them had left the locker room. I needed to talk to them, and I couldn't show them this hatred. I said a quick prayer in the 10 steps it took me to see him. I really have no idea what I said, but I was told it was calm, relaxed, and forgiving. It was God talking. I truly believe that. It wasn't me because I never remember even thinking those things. Things aren't all so clean sometimes, though. I was still angry. I became angry at God for not allowing me even a few moments of retribution. There was nothing but love that my family and I showed to his son. It was incredibly unfair. I welcomed him into my home. I fed him. We hung out together. Whatever time that I could give to his son, I did. This is how he showed me his appreciation. I don't know if these stages are supposed to go in order, but for me, the hate came first, and then the hurt. This doesn't have a storybook ending. There are loose ends that can't be tied up, and even if they could, I don't know if I want them to. Maybe this is a bit of a confession. I've never spoken to the dad since this happened. There's an article written about him in the newspaper about 5 years after this had happened, and he had gone on to become a pastor. I thought that at some point he would seek me out and apologize, and I would tell him that I forgave him, which I had, but it never happened. I haven't forgotten, but I have forgiven. I know that there were a multitude of things going on which he had no control over, and basketball was just one of those things. I know that he never meant all those horrible things that he said and that he threatened. Last week we talked about forgiving difficult people. This was difficult. This was messy. I will be able to make myself angry every time I think about this for the rest of my life. Maybe Mr. Borst is right to have me take the first 2 steps of forgiveness, hatred and hurt. I do not know, and maybe I am no different than anyone else on this. But I'm also the right guy for the next 2 stages, healing and coming together. There has been healing here and a readiness and hope for coming together. It is as though the goodness of Christ pulls us in certain directions, even when it might not be our first nature to be pulled that way. For that, I am grateful. I saw his obituary 4 years ago. He had a stroke, passed away suddenly. I'll have to meet up with him sometime in heaven to complete this forgiveness cycle. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm Miss Slatsma, for those of you who don't know me, and I teach science class over there. I want to tell you guys a little story this morning about forgiveness. So, Mr. Warner shared about the first couple stages of forgiveness according to Lou Smedes, and I want to tell you guys a little story about sort of the last half. So, when I was in college, I spent 2 summers living with missionary friends in a little town in East Africa, in Uganda. We spent our summers there doing a lot of different things. I can talk your ear off some other time, don't worry. One of the most memorable weeks I had was during my second summer there. I learned more about a group called the LRA and its victims called the Lost Boys, or the Invisible Children. Some of you may have heard of this group a couple of years ago when a documentary called The Invisible Children was gaining publicity and popularity. The LRA, or Lord's Resistance Army, is a crazy, fanatical rebel group led by a man named Joseph Kony, who you may have heard of. Kony is crazy, claiming that he's following spiritual leading to overthrow various governments. Scary stuff. This army grew for almost 20 years by abducting and brainwashing young boys to be soldiers and young girls to be slaves. These young boys and young girls were drugged, starved, forced to kill people, including family members. Thankfully, this group has shrunk, but it's still around. It can still be found in small groups in the jungles of Central and East Africa today. A friend of mine named David had been abducted and brainwashed as a child, and through God's power found an escape a couple of years before I met him, those couple of summers. He's got an incredible story, which I can share some other time. So I learned more about this group in particular by spending a few days that second summer in a small town called Obalanga, near mine. This town had seen countless LRA abductions and almost 400 LRA deaths by the summer that I had visited. The community was hurting and full of hate, obviously, towards this horrible rebel group that had killed and abducted children in their town. Our job was to help encourage healing. Sounded impossible, right? With the prompting of the Holy Spirit, the community leaders of Obalanga knew that healing was needed, which was really awesome. They knew that the LRA soldiers were never, ever, ever going to apologize for the countless deaths, abductions that they had caused in just this little town alone. These community leaders also knew that their community was in serious need of restoration, both physically and emotionally. They needed to find a way to bring a sense of honor to their dead and closure to these raids. It was only through the Spirit's prompting that these community leaders even wanted to try to encourage this atmosphere of forgiveness, inspiring their town to forgive the rebel army and to come together. So my team had the honor of aiding in the physical part of this process, which was really interesting. We spent a few days hiking through the surrounding area to uncover corpses of men and women that had been killed during these raids. We helped dig holes. We helped clear out a section of land for a real cemetery, honoring the lives that had been lost in this community. It was a week I'll never forget. I learned a really powerful lesson about forgiveness and healing from this community that week, and it's this. We can't expect that everyone who has wronged us will apologize. We can't expect that our friends will see when they've hurt our feelings. We can't expect that those around us will feel badly when they've hurt us. But in order to find peace in this life, we have to forgive anyway. This community had been raided and almost ruined by a group of people that didn't apologize. They were broken, disheartened, miserable, but through the Spirit's prompting, they knew that they needed to find healing to restore this community. So I wonder what this looks like for us today. I know that every single one of us in this room has been hurt, even in our loving and safe communities that we're all a part of. I pray, of course, that these hurts are followed by apologies, followed by good conversations, and followed by strengthened friendships. Unfortunately, I also know that that's not always true. Sometimes when we've been hurt, those hurts are followed by eye rolls instead of apologies. We've all been there, right? Or by blank stares instead of conversation. Those hurts are the hardest ones to forgive, I think. Forgiving others isn't always easy or natural, but we know it's a nice thing to do, right? Yes, scratch that. I think actually that forgiving people is a command from God, no matter the situation. The command is given for our own good, of course, but also for the good of community, which Lou Smeeds talks about in the end of those four steps of forgiveness. In Colossians 3, Paul tells us this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other, forgive each other. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive, as the Lord forgave you. Over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." So again, our worship class has been talking about these 4 steps of forgiveness. As Mr. Warner's talked about, there's this natural hurt, hate, when we feel offended, when we've been wronged. But in the end, he also argues that in order to truly forgive, we have to find ways to heal, ultimately leading to coming together in community. So, what do we do when it's a hurt that isn't followed by a sincere apology? We still have to forgive, you guys. Yeah, but Miss Latsma, you don't get it. This happened to me. Yeah, I know. I don't know everybody's story. But here's the thing. We can't forgive all on our own. It's impossible. We can't. We have to ask God to help us. We have to. But I promise, God wants a peace-filled life for all of us. He doesn't want us hurt. He doesn't want us holding grudges. He wants us to live in peace. He wants us to be healed. He will help us forgive. And when we do, beautiful communities can come together.